started. Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. This is the Environment Committee meeting of the City of Rehoboth Beach. It is Thursday, July 20th, and I call this meeting to order at 1 p.m. I'm going to do a roll call vote. Roll call. Mr. Joe Vesio.
Here.
Mary Peck.
Here.
Charlie Garlow.
Here.
Carolyn Diefendorfer.
Here.
And Eric Seward.
Here.
Absent are Nettie Green and Catherine Birkeland and Heather Metz. There's a quorum and we can conduct business today. Approval of minutes. The last meeting held was May 18th, 2023. Those meeting minutes were sent out. Are there any comments, concerns, changes, revisions? If not, I would entertain a motion.
Were they sent out a long time ago or recently?
I think they were sent out.
Long time ago?
A long
Okay, then
time
I
ago.
did see them and I didn't have any changes.
I think it was the
recent. I didn't get anything recent.
I think it was the 26th of May.
Yeah, okay.
Something like that.
Yep.
So with that, I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
And do we have a second?
Seconded.
Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, and the meeting minutes pass as they were sent out. I don't have any correspondence identified, and old business. Remind everyone that we've got a few recommendations that have been sent to the Board of Commissioners. We're finally freeing up our schedule to start to discuss some of those things. First was at our last Commissioners meeting. We discussed the gas-powered landscape equipment, and that did not seem to be an entertaining thing to continue to discuss or consider by the mayor and commissioners. I will say that at least one commissioner came out pretty swinging pretty rough in opposed to it. And questioning some of the rationale and things like that. I will say, and I want the committee to know that I think that was more personally related towards me and not the committee. So I don't want the committee to be discouraged by some of these things that we discuss. And you know, a few things that were noted, at least were what's the rationale? Well, our CDP calls for taking serious consideration and actions related to climate change and sea level rise, and this directly does that. So I think all of you probably read some of the news articles or watched the meeting. I tried to rationalize and advocate on the committee's behalf.
May I interrupt to say I think you did a great job of presenting and defending our proposal, so thank you.
Yeah. I also, you know, one thing that, and I just generally want to say this because, you know, I chair this committee and I may not always, I'm not an expert like all of you, but I chair this committee for you all to be voices and to move it forward to the mayor and commissioners. I don't always necessarily agree with or have the knowledge that you all do on particular things. And one thing that I'm disappointed in is I don't know how I would have voted for that. And it's one of the reasons why I abstained from voting on whether that, you know, should go before the commissioners or not, because I have another opportunity to vote on it for real and make changes to it, et cetera. But my job is to help guide you all as voices of our community to recommendations in a coherent way that the mayor and commissioners will take serious. So I just want to say that I appreciate everything that you guys do, and I hope that I do a good job guiding us in a way to make proposals to the mayor and commissioner. So I want to thank you all for your service to the committee and just recognize that I don't know how I will vote on certain things, but my job is that this committee has a cohesive collective voice to bring to the mayor and commissioners.
Well, one thing, I'd like to just say a couple things, since I was the one that ended up being assigned to work on it and put it together. That from, I didn't watch the meeting, but I read the article in the Cape Gazette, and the sarcasm of certain commissioners was disappointing, and some of the comments were so ridiculous that, you know, I thought, why would I put a serious effort into something that's not taken seriously? And one of the examples is, well, we could never meet these deadlines. Well, why can't you change the deadlines? Or, for example, oh, it's going to cost $250,000 to replace our equipment. Well, they replaced the equipment anyways. They had a big auction in the spring. My husband was there. There was tons of landscape equipment being auctioned off. So if they were more serious-minded, they would say, well, you know, maybe we don't want to spend this money right now, but when we do replace things, we'll replace it with electric. Like, I didn't hear any substantive discussion, and the one that made me actually laugh out loud when I was reading the article was, what if we had a big power failure and we couldn't charge our landscape equipment? Well, okay, we have a big power failure, and the first thing we're going to concern ourselves with is if we can cut the grass. I mean, these comments were like over the top in terms of not being serious-minded at all. And so in the future, if I'm going to work on something, on the one hand, they wanted this very detailed proposal, but yet they got hung up on the details. So if I'm going to work on something in the future, should it be more broad? Like, just say to them in general, we would like something along the lines of phasing out gas-powered equipment, but you decide what your deadlines are and how you're going to do it. But if, you know, instead of having me work for hours on something that they're going to get hung up on the minutiae and say, well, we don't like this deadline of December. So right now, you know, I've offered to work on this night sky thing. Am I going to sit there for hours and days coming up with little details that we'll discuss in here for months, and then they'll get there and say, sit on it for 6 months and say, well, those deadlines are too soon. So, you know, I would like a little more guidance of what do these commissioners want from us? Do they want general concepts to reject, or do they want us to work very hard on detailed proposals that they're not going to take seriously? So I would really, you know, if we're going to be an advisory committee in this city, what is it that they want? You know, I don't want to waste my time.
I share that frustration, and I just want to say I kind of got off track, but with my comments and saying I don't know how I would vote for, you know, certain things. But one of the reasons why I am in favor of them being discussed, and I was disappointed that we didn't at least move it forward to another workshop meeting so that I could hear more from the public on the issue.
Right.
But Mary, I hear your frustration, and I am going to take that feedback directly back to the mayor and commissioners.
Yeah, and I felt the same frustration. I watched it, and Edward, I felt sorry for you. I was like, man, he needs some help, and because I mean, I think they saw blood, and it was just they started attacking, you know, and one person in particular, and by you bringing out probably it was against you, it seemed to be like that. But anyway, so as I'm looking, you know, it's like, you know, when you present projects at work, whatever, I'm just going to say that, is it exactly right. Is there a form, or is there maybe a form that we could develop and say, well, what do you want? You know, do you want to see cost? Do you want to see that? You know, that is consistent so that we are going down that right path to give them what they want. So
I mean, we're using a standardized format that everyone's using. It covers the certain topics. And I think our proposal, I think it covered the realization that, yeah, upfront costs might be more, but you have to change equipment over time anyway. Gas-powered equipment saves you money in maintenance and other issues. You're saving money on gasoline. So I think
Yeah.
we covered everything that should have been covered, and I think this committee did a fine job with it.
I did too. And you know, the one thing that I asked is, you know, so we had Liz in here and she said she had 6 or 7 pieces of equipment, you know, which I was thinking that was reasonable. She's, you know, that from that department, they said it's $60,000 or $70,000. But we didn't hear anything about what does the wastewater department have that's gas powered? That's $169,000. You know, it's like we were just going for cutting grass. I don't, you know, we didn't hear anything about that. So I was surprised that they
The one
spoke.
thing I thought of is the blowers may not be solely within her department. I just thought of that. It could be that I don't know who has responsibility for cleaning the parking lot, for example. But
Yeah, I don't know. I was so surprised because I was thinking, you know, we're looking to make, you know, a budget of $70,000, $80,000 based on what Liz said, you know. And then all of a sudden, someone comes up with, you know, in the meeting, $169,000.
I didn't ask for clarification because for me, it was already a decided issue.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
I wasn't going to waste more time. And I
Yeah.
don't want to waste a lot of time here talking about it.
Yeah.
I've got to take away that I'm going to share the frustration and
Right.
to the mayor and commissioners and ask for better direction on what they want and how they want it.
That's very good.
So just real quick, some of what I heard, because I took some notes as I was listening to it. I couldn't be there that day. But it might have been Commissioner Sharp, I'm not sure if it was her or somebody else, saying they wanted a more holistic plan for, you know, environmental issues. They also said that we should ask the taxpayers for input. Now, I'm not sure how we go about getting some kind of survey together where we could ask, you know, like, are people concerned about noise? Or is there more people concerned about the light pollution? You know, what is the public concerned about? Because we only hear from somebody who comes in and is upset about a given issue. We don't know if that's a single view or if the broader population agrees.
Well, Carolyn, that's exactly what Edward said when he mentioned that we have a climate action plan proposal before the mayor and commissioners, which would comprehensively address all those proposals and all the ones that are on today's agenda as well. So if they were to take that up, that would perhaps resolve that issue. But I'm trying to figure out what lessons we might be able to learn. One was that we were sort of taken by surprise by the $250,000 price tag. Maybe in the future, we should always try to get our city manager to say what the fiscal, the money impact might be for any of our proposals.
And enforcement as well, because I took it upon that, you know, not only with the
can't
cost.
enforce
If we can't
something-
enforce it, then they already admitted that, they admitted that they have a huge problem with that. So, that's cost and enforcement, yeah.
So I'll be honest and frank. We can think about them, and we can discuss it. But at the end of the day, that's an administrative action. If the mayor and commissioners seriously want to do something, then that's on the city manager and staff to figure out how to make it happen. And yeah, we can talk about the impacts of enforcement, and I think we're actually hiring another code enforcement person. And I think that city manager is doing what he needs to do to make sure that he's able to facilitate and do what we as a city have asked him to do.
I would think it might be good for us to be open to amendments to our proposals as well. For example, Carolyn's husband mentioned that he had this expensive piece of equipment. He didn't want to have to just junk that. We could have been open to the idea of an amendment saying, okay, keep residential people off of this proposal altogether and just have a smaller impact on the commercial side of things. And maybe even take an amendment to say, just focus for now on the leaf blowers because they seem to be the ones that we get the most complaints about, and leave the other equipment for later. That way we get a half or a third of a loaf rather than getting none of a loaf.
So
I think if they were serious about these ideas, they would have seen that possibility, because obviously they're the mayor and commissioners, they can do whatever they want with it. And if they thought, well, this is a good idea, but this, that, or the other, and they could have done it, I don't know. And in fact, I don't know that it's really our job to actually draft ordinances for the city. They have a city solicitor. So I think, to your point, Eric, the only way that things like this will happen is if you get a public support behind it and they start hearing from people, this is what we want. Otherwise, they're not going to take it too seriously.
I agree. I would love to see a way to get a survey out to ask what people's biggest environmental concerns are. Is it noise? Is it, the gas-powered lawn equipment? Is it light pollution? What, is it the idling? Because I'll be honest, when we talked about the idling policy, never once occurred to me the school and the parents sitting in line waiting for their kids. You do see them lining up 30 minutes before they're going to pick up their child because they want to get in line first, and they're probably sitting there idling for those 30 minutes. I never thought about that. So is idling maybe a bigger issue overall to the public than the lawnmowers?
So Carolyn, one of the points that you brought up was, them saying that we should have gotten more public feedback.
Right.
The city is implementing a new tool
That engagement
that
HQ.
we'll be able to do more of
Okay.
that in the future with the city's help. But I think talking about this specific topic and everything else leading up to today, we engaged city staff, we engaged landscape equipment. There's been numerous articles and newspaper reports about us talking about it. So I think that we used all of the resources as a committee that we could have. In the future, there's going to be more tools that we can utilize, but again, I don't want this committee to be discouraged because I think we did everything that we could and should have. And the reality is, people are just not going to pay attention to certain things until it rises to the level of going before the mayor and commissioners.
Right.
And that's just the reality. And there's not going to be a whole lot that changes that. And one of the things that I'm disappointed at is we did not allow the opportunity for that initial discussion to lead into more public feedback at an additional meeting. But I think I will ask the mayor and city manager that this committee would like more feedback from the mayor and commissioners on how we present recommendations, what's included, and just more guidance. And one of the topics was, well, it's not holistic enough. Well, or it wasn't detailed enough. So you wanted us to spend more time, and my public comment was, so we were supposed to spend more time talking about something when it's not even from my perspective, it was a non-starter from the first sentence. So why spend more time researching, et cetera?
Right, but I guess when I heard the more holistic plan, it was in the sense of, is gas-powered lawn equipment really the most critical issue we have? Or is the non-idling piece critical?
Right.
If we're going to prioritize what the city maybe either puts regulations out for or focuses on, maybe they can't enforce everything, but the majority of the public believes, the light issue is bigger than this. I don't know. I took it to mean more holistic in the environmental issues,
Yeah,
not
no,
necessarily more holistic in that particular item.
Correct. And the reality is that we can't do that. We can't prioritize issues if we don't have the support from the city. So I've got my feedback to take back to the mayor, commissioners, and city manager. I'd say we just table this topic until we get more feedback and then decide how to move forward, if we move forward, or just put it on the pipeline to revisit again in a year. But I'd say at this point, we just sort of table it until we have more feedback.
What's the current timing on the engagement HQ item? I don't remember what that was said, when that would be available.
I think they were going to have it live in 8 weeks, which would have been
Okay.
a week ago.
Okay,
I'm looking at Ann to see if she can confirm that.
okay,
Yeah, it was about 8 weeks out.
okay.
There was discussion that may have changed sort of our use and how it's launched, but I think at the end of the day, we all agreed that we're just going with what it is, and
Okay,
I'm pretty
Okay.
sure that the timeline was about 8 weeks out.
okay.
Okay, with that, again, I just want to close with, I don't want it to be a discouragement. I'm telling you that the work here and all of your input is important, and I personally thank you for it. Charlie, Mary, are there any updates on the offshore wind that we need to be made aware of?
I haven't heard anything lately.
Well, SB 170 passed. Hasn't been signed by the governor yet, and that's the one talking about wind power. I'm so sorry. The SB 170 passed in the General Assembly in Dover, Delaware, about wind power, and it basically doesn't say we're going to buy wind power and let's make it happen now. It says DNREC will do a study on how is the best way to proceed, connecting us with the grid, the transmission wires, and making sure that we have a good process for making a procurement of wind power after this is reported to the governor by the end of this calendar year. So that's where we stand on wind power. I got a copy of the bill, SB 170, if anybody wants to take a look.
Did I see something, though, where Ocean City is now trying to back away from wind power off their shores? I thought there was an article recently about that there's a group trying to fight that.
Well, yes, there are people in New Jersey who are,
No, Ocean City, Maryland.
Ocean City, Maryland has always been opposed. Their mayor and everybody has been opposed to it. However, the state of Maryland has decided they want to build these wind farms off the Maryland coast with Maryland ratepayers paying for it. So Ocean City's been in that fight for quite a long time. I don't know if there's been any progress to help them, defeat the wind farms, because things seem to be moving ahead in that regard. What I was mentioning over here was about a Delaware proposal
Right, no,
for
I
offshore wind.
get it, yep.
Well, this is just sort of anecdotal, but people I know who go to the Jersey Shore say that they're getting pretty close to starting some projects off of the South Jersey Shore, and now there's protest signs all over the place, and now in New Jersey, they're, it's not going to go down so easily there either, I guess.
At the same time, there are wind turbines on the land behind the hotels at Atlantic City, and they said, somebody told me, that all the rooms on the side facing the wind turbines are more booked than the ones facing the ocean because people want to see what these wind turbines look like. So there's opinions on both sides of the wind turbines in New Jersey.
Sure are.
All right.
Yeah, but I haven't heard, I don't know, Edward, have you heard anything from our particular projects here about where they
I
are?
have not heard anything recently. But again, I know that Charlie, at least, is more in touch and in tune with some of the updates than I am. So,
There's been a suggestion that whales may have been hurt by the preparation work for the wind turbines, and then they came out with, I sent this forward to a couple of us, talking about whale deaths are not linked to wind preparation according to these federal and state independent investigations of these situations. And it makes a certain amount of sense because the whale deaths have been happening at an increased level since 2016, way before anybody thought about making wind farms happen here, so it'd be hard to connect the two.
okay. Well, I don't think there's any action items for us, but I'm just going to continue to keep this on so we can be updated as new things arise. I still have on the agenda the anti-idling policy. I think Heather was really leading the charge on that. She's not here today. I don't know if anyone wants to make any comments or has recommendations, but I would assume just table that until she can.
Well, maybe I could add one thing, which is that per your instruction, I called Chief Banks and asked him about the enforceability of idling laws like that. And he said, well, Charlie, you should probably think about the fact that our police cars have computers in them, a bunch of computers, and they need to have the engine running to make sure that you don't turn it off, and then the computer has to be rebooted, which can take about 20 minutes. And I said, gee, I had no idea that that was a problem. He says, yeah, and you might find that some of the truckers who have similar computers in their trucks might have the same problem. And I said, well, maybe they do, but I called up the state of Delaware, which has an anti-idling provision in an office, and a young woman I spoke to there who was in charge of the program, and she said they haven't had any complaints from any of the trucking people about the idling provision making their computers go haywire. So apparently that issue that Chief Banks brought up may not have a wide resonance, I'm not sure. But the other part I was going to bring up was that I was in favor of the idea of, we have other states and jurisdictions have anti-idling provisions. Most of them require that you be idling for a certain period of time, like 3 to 5 minutes or some such. And it's my hope that this committee may consider having 0 time as the time that you catch them idling in violation of a code provision, because who wants to make your enforcement officer stand there for 5 minutes at the tailpipe breathing pollution in order to document a violation? It should be, hey, they're idling now, they were probably idling 3 seconds earlier and 5 minutes earlier and all that sort of stuff.
Well,
So-
I think that's really a hard one. If somebody pulls up to the curb to pick up, takeout, and they run in and literally run out to turn, I wonder if the act of turning the car, having to start the car, to me, puts more pollutants in the air, maybe than it running for 15 seconds or 30 seconds, whatever it takes for them to run in, get their package and run back out.
Well, you may note that in my write-up, I mentioned that Senator Coons's wife had her car stolen because she left it idling with the key
Well, if
in
they're,
the
if you're
ignition.
not, okay, to me, there's a difference of, they should not leave the car idling if they're not in it. I 100% agree with that, because then there's nobody there to control the car. If the car, let's say they get out and it's not properly in park, that's different. I'm thinking of the situation where you have a passenger jump out to get takeout and somebody's in the car. I think 0 tolerance for any amount of idling then is probably, I would not be supportive of that.
Well, you would probably think that enforcement discretion would be used in a particular position like the example you gave, the kids running inside to pick up the order of ice cream or whatever. You don't want it to melt. Makes sense. But the instances I've seen have been mostly construction workers who pull into Royal Farms, which is very close to my house, and they'll order chicken, and their idling truck is outside. Then they come outside and eat the chicken in the cab of their
Well, no,
car. They're 20 minutes out
well-
there idling,
Well, that's clearly a violation of
Should
the
be,
state policy already. You can't sit in your truck for 20 minutes
Well-
with it idling, I don't believe.
Well, the state rule only applies to tractor trailers. So the smaller trucks, it's perfectly legal what they're doing. They're in Delaware, they're allowed to idle. Those, the landscape trucks and the vans and the cars. The state law is only for, it says how many axles or whatever.
8,500 pounds to,
Yeah, big trucks are not allowed to idle, but,
So the fact that Rehoboth already has a non-idling
policy.
policy,
Policy, but
in
not a
my
code
mind, we need signs coming into town to tell everybody that there's a non-idling policy for everyone. If it's not a problem for the state, it's hard to tell people that it's a problem if there's nothing posted. And I don't know how many people sit down and read through a town's code before they drive into it to pick something up and leave.
No, of
So
course,
I
we
believe we
definitely
need
need
I
signs.
believe we need signage, and you probably only need it, 3 places,
I was talking.
4 places, by the school, the other direction coming in, Rehoboth Avenue,
or by the Grove.
yeah, and coming in Bayard. So there's not that many places that you would need the signs. But there needs to be a way to tell people that, idling is not allowed.
Well, I was talking with a friend about this in town, and he said, "Well, what about in the wintertime when people, a lot of car models now have remote starts, and you start your car in the winter and wait for it to warm up. Your car is idling then, or
Yep.
you start your car to warm it up so that you can clean off the windshield, and
Yep.
so are we going to regulate that?" And I said, I don't think we've been thinking about that, but that is, that's something
I mean,
else to
sometimes you have to,
discuss.
when it's really, really cold, you have to warm up your windshield in order to get the frost off it.
Well, Newark, and when we first started talking about this, which was very early on, like 3-4 years ago, and I researched it, and the only place in Delaware that has their own, at that time, laws was Newark. And they had a whole long list of exceptions, and one of them was for extreme cold or extreme heat, or for elderly passengers in the heat and such. And there's ways of dealing with certain parts of it. And also, they said we had the Newark, some of the people in Newark who are on their environmental committee said that basically it's not a big deal in terms of city enforcement staff and whatnot. They posted signs in the, like as you're suggesting, in the areas where people tend to idle, and haven't really had a lot of conflict with police and enforcement and such. So, and I thought at the time, well, Newark passed this law. It went smoothly. They got a lot of praise from DENREC for doing it, and I think they even had a grant from DENREC to study air pollution and whatnot. And so my thinking was, well, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. Let's just do similar to what Newark did and tweak it to what needs to be tweaked to apply to us and see how that goes and keep it simple. But it just, it's been out there for a long time, and now I guess Ed asked Heather to do some more research. And so really I don't think there's a lot of work that we need to do other than where we got to it with Heather was we as a committee were going to talk about what exceptions we would have and for these things like extreme weather and whatnot. So I guess maybe we should wait and see whether Heather has anything further and whether we want to delve into really crafting a detailed thing, because Newark's has like their anti-idling law is like a whole page, and it has all the various scenarios that are exempted and whatnot. So whether we want to sink our teeth into that, I don't know. Whether maybe, Edward, it would be a good idea to check with your colleagues whether this is something they would consider or not, might be a good thing.
Just good driving courtesy to turn off your car when you're not in the car. Not only does it save gasoline and pollution and money and all those sorts of things, but it prevents car theft, and it's just a good habit to have, like putting your seatbelt on. If we can change people's thinking to say, put your seatbelt on, take your key with you when you get out of the car. Of course, we could always require everybody to have an electric car, in which case idling is not an issue because electric cars don't idle, but that's just a fantasy. But, it just seems to me that for right now, something we can do for global warming and these other problems is to say, people, don't idle. Just take your key with you. Anybody want to see the Newark, Delaware's provisions? I've got that available here.
I think we've looked at them in the past. Yeah, I would just, one, I might do a gut check with some of the commissioners to see if this is something that they would even be interested in hearing about if we move forward. And I know that Heather said that she's had quite a few schedule conflicts, but I know that she said that she could, that she was still, I think, working on it, and I think the last, we kind of left her with putting together a list of exceptions, I think is where we last. And one, I don't recall if we discussed it or not, but I know, people even, I guess extreme weather is subjective, but a lot of people have their pets in their car and may run into a store for something, and I don't know if that's something that we want to address in exceptions or not, but I'm sure that's something that will come up.
I'd be glad to have a FIDO amendment in our proposal if that's what it takes to get it across the line.
Charlie, could I task you with maybe connecting with Heather Metz and just kind of see where she was at with the sort of a final recommendation or listed exceptions, et cetera?
Oh, and then, by the way, in the meantime, the state of Delaware has outlawed idling, and there's a 1-800 number you can call, according to the young woman I spoke to today, and report violations. So,
They have
Try it out.
a new law?
no, this is from 2016,
Oh, okay.
the state of Delaware anti-idling.
Yeah.
But it has 8,500 pounds
Yeah,
for the
that one.
truck.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So how are you going to measure whether it's an 8,500-pound truck or not? I can't guesstimate.
Was there an axle requirement on that as well?
Not in the state of Delaware.
Well, the thing I noticed just when I first started working on this was that I think those vehicles kind of know that law and they get it. And that's not really our problem area here in Rehoboth. It's the smaller vehicles that when people are complaining about what's going on at Royal Farms and around the Grove Park, it's like the landscape trucks is probably the people that have written to us and emailed us about the problem. They often will cite landscape vehicles and basically work vans that are on people that are working here in town and are on their lunch break. And that seems to be what we hear the most complaints. So I don't think the idling law, the state law is
Well,
violated extensively around.
Well, so I've taken notice just in the mornings and stuff when all the deliveries come, and there's really just two people that, Cisco Foods leaves their truck running.
Oh, they do?
They do. Every morning, they're at Dogfish when I go get coffee. They leave Cisco does, and then like your US Foods. So I haven't taken it, and that's it. And most,
well, I'm wondering if some of that is because of the refrigerated trucks.
that's
Because
that's another idea. Yeah.
Isn't there an exception in Delaware related to the refrigerated trucks, I believe?
I don't know about Delaware, but I know early on when we were talking about the Newcastle ordinance, refrigeration, refrigerated trucks was definitely one of the exceptions.
Right.
Emergency vehicles, et
Yeah.
cetera.
I mean, I'd like to see maybe, I don't want to, I'm not going to throw any city employees under the bus, but I've seen city trucks sitting
I have to.
running when people are not in them. So,
EMS as well, over at the donut shop.
I've seen if refrigerated trucks have refrigerated food inside, and they open up the back gate, they pull out the food, they take it inside the restaurant or whatever, they're leaving the back gate completely open. So all that cold air they're supposed to be so concerned about, whoosh, right out the back end of the truck. So those people shouldn't be idling in order to preserve their food, because they're not really thinking it's going to melt or anything bad within the 5 minutes that they're taking to make the delivery happen.
Well, so I'm gonna take two actions from this, and whether we move forward with this or not, I am gonna ask the city manager to, one, look at signage, because we already have a resolution. It's not enforceable, but people should know that there's a resolution and policy that we don't want people idling in the city, and if there's proper signage or education about it. And then secondly, if we have such a resolution, we certainly should be leading by example in our city staff vehicles not doing that. So those are two takeaways I'm going to send to the city manager. And then otherwise, I think we can table this until Heather is back on how we move it forward or not. If that's fine with everyone.
That's great.
Charlie, I'm going to let you take it away with pollinator gardens.
actually,
Oh, I'm sorry.
can I jump in on that?
Please do.
That's,
Oh, yeah,
so
I-
the next two items kind of go hand in hand.
Sure.
Ed and I had met with the city manager about some ideas I had to kind of expand the Arbor Day, Earth Day, since they're a week apart. And, I had some big ideas, but unfortunately, the calendar doesn't allow for that next year because everything's already booked to be able to do like more of like an environmental fair or to get people to come in and have, educational booths and some of that kind of stuff. Everything's already booked in the spring. But the one idea that kind of thought about, and I've talked to, I'm a volunteer with Main Street, but I'm also a Rehoboth and Bloom volunteer that falls under Main Street. And one of the things that kind of had been talked about was maybe as part of this, creating either a pollinator garden, or one of the ladies from Rehoboth and Bloom threw out maybe a butterfly garden with signage for people to learn about, what it is and that kind of thing. So I actually reached out to Commissioner Markert about let me back up a second. The Arbor Day program that they already do with planting trees in conjunction with the elementary school falls under the Trees and Green Infrastructure Committee. And they work with the elementary school on that. So I reached out to him about the idea of maybe in conjunction with the Arbor Day plantings, doing some type of garden in conjunction with that. And, whether the kids can help with that or whatever, but do it in conjunction with that. So I'm actually going to their August 11th meeting to talk about that, to see if they would be receptive to that. And one of the ladies from Rehoboth and Bloom has done a butterfly garden in conjunction with an elementary school in the past, and would be willing to help with that, and have butterfly houses and that kind of stuff. So that's sort of where my idea is at this point, is, expanding that Arbor Day celebration to include creation of some type of pollinator, butterfly type garden somewhere in the city.
Nice.
So
Maybe we could invite Cindy Lovett to come and talk to us here
Cindy's-
at one of these meetings. I'm
Microphone.
so sorry, there I am again. Maybe we could invite
yeah,
Cindy Lovett.
yeah,
who's head
Cindy,
of
yeah,
the-
Cindy's
Rehoboth and
involved.
Bloom.
It's yes, no, Cindy's definitely involved. Jill, and I can't think of Jill's last name right now, is the one who has done the butterfly garden in the past with an elementary school. So Jill has volunteered to be involved with this if we can get approval to do it.
Is that the garden that they just planted over by the museum? Is that considered a pollinator garden?
No.
It's not.
No, I mean, I think there are some plants in there that that do that, but it's not considered a pollinator garden, no. Mm-mm.
Well, that would be part of my proposal. Whenever the city is doing any kind of gardening, they ought to think about pollinators. That as a key point of the program. So they would set a good example for the rest of us to put pollinator gardens in our front yards.
So I think I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I think that I don't think an ordinance is going to be well received. I think it needs to be recommendations to the city administratively, encouraging the city's behavior and advocating for better education on our website and through email blasts, et cetera. And perhaps even this engagement HQ may have a lot of opportunities for that type of thing as well.
Because one of my ideas with this expanded, say, Earth Day program would be to, present things that an individual homeowner can do with, I personally do not agree with mandating things for the homeowners. I think, I don't believe there's a one-size-fits-all, and I don't think that everybody can afford the same things. But I think if you present to the general public, here are things you can do to improve the environment, you might, if you can afford it, you might do solar panels. You might do a pollinator garden in your yard. You might do a rain barrel. Here's the proper way to recycle, that kind of thing. Because I don't believe that everybody is going to adopt everything, and I don't believe you can mandate, behavior. I think you have to educate and let people make their choices for what works for them. Charlie, I know you are very big on get rid of your yards and put in, pollinator gardens everywhere. And while that may work for some, having grass isn't always bad. I found a website that talks about the fact that grass actually does more for cleaning the environment than trees because it grows faster.
Well, I'm not making any suggestion there
But-
be any code provisions changed, Edward.
Right.
This is all volunteer and encouraging people and setting a good example, those sorts of things. But I do think that we can ask the mayor and commissioners to set a good example by doing things on our own properties where we currently have people mowing the grass for us as a city property, like around the traffic circle, for example. We can, of course, they already have some flowers there, but those sorts of places we should be talking to our contractors about putting in the right kinds of gardens instead of ones that don't help out with pollinators.
This is definitely a trend throughout all the governments in Delaware, the state, the counties, of doing these things. And I think the city's been doing some good work on this. And one of the things that I've brought up a few times, and I wanted to ask you, Edward, if we were going to pursue putting signs that you can get from the National Wildlife Federation saying native habitat in some of the places that the city's already put native plants. Is there a person on the city staff that we can ask, can you look into this program? This is a simple thing an educational thing where we give ourselves credit for the city's already planted a few things that Liz has talked about here before that. And what struck me was when she said she actually had received some negative feedback because they thought it looked unkempt. And, native gardens do have a different look that some people aren't used to. So if the National Wildlife Federation has a program where they will give a sign saying explaining the whole thing. So is there a person that we can talk to on city staff about whether they would fill out that paperwork and get it
Yeah,
filled?
I think Liz is obviously the person that's in charge of all of the city parks and gardens. And I think she heard us, talk about that program. I don't know that she's done anything with it, but part of, if we're going to make recommendations, that certainly should be part of it. Because I've heard from people, and I think in one of our meetings stated that she's gotten complaints about it looking like it's not, that garden over there looks crappy, what is the city of Rehoboth doing? But it's supposed to look that way. So just educating people that, hey, this is a pollinator garden, it looks the way it does for a reason, it helps our environment, and some signage to inform people of that, I think is key.
Well, sometimes we talk about doing these things, but we never really connect with the right city staff. And something simple like that doesn't even need to be a formal proposal from our committee. If there's one person that is just told, by the commissioners, we'd like this. We'd like you to look into this.
Yeah, I will send that to the city manager and Liz Lingo. But I think it certainly, if we do formalize a proposal, it should certainly include that. Hey, this is what we think, detailed, these are resources we think should be linked on the city website. These are things that we think the city arborist should enact as policy in her day-to-day. This is something that I think the mayor and commissioners should consider in the future. This is something that, the committee recommends that our grass cutting and commercial landscaping practices should include. And I think it just needs to be very detailed and outlined who, what, why, what the recommendations are.
Edward, you may recall that you had tasked me with the redrafting this proposal of mine to specify what things are recommendations for the mayor and commissioners
Yep.
and what things are for the city staff and the city attorney. And I did so, and I've got a copy of it here. I could briefly say that what it suggests for the mayor and commissioners, is that they try to get their staff to make pollinator-friendly gardens, and that the staff should be, and the attorney should redraft their contracts with the contracted maintenance of the gardens, people, whoever they are, private contractors, to adopt these practices and to get more pollinator-friendly plants and trees in our city. So if you haven't seen that text, here it is again.
Yeah, so I will, I will email the city manager and Liz about at least the pollinator garden, some signage to inform the public. But if this is something that we want to vote on, I'd suggest that we send a final draft out to everyone for the next meeting. And please always include Ann so it can be embedded in the agenda. And then we can vote on a list of recommendations to send to the city manager and mayor and commissioners. But I think the signage is a simple, easy administrative thing that I'll do as good practice. And then we can substitute that with a more holistic list of recommendations, if that's a fine path forward for everyone. Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Excellent, thank you. Especially, Carolyn, you did a lot of hard work and research, and Charlie, you've done a lot of hard work in putting together those recommendations, so thank you. We had gotten a couple concerns about noise and light pollution, and also including the dark sky initiatives that we very briefly started to talk about at our last meeting. So I think we need to decide what our path forward is going to be. And I think both of those things are a pretty big undertaking, and it may be good for me to check the pulse of the mayor and commissioners on if we are going to spend a lot of time and energy on those two topics. Is there any reception to talking about them or hearing about recommendations? Again, we talked about the dark sky initiatives a while back. Again, Carolyn, you might have had a better recollection. I do not remember why it didn't move forward.
That was before my time on
Yeah,
the committee.
it had, it was around the time that some of the wireless carriers are putting up the 4G poles, and especially on Rehoboth Avenue and the boardwalk, and that's really when it got a lot of traction, being like, well, if they need to replace these light posts and bulbs anyway, why don't we implement this dark skies initiative? And again, it went absolutely nowhere from there. I don't recall the reason why, but I do know that in our next, I think it's actually for this fiscal year, and it would be in the fall, starting. Don't hold me to that. It may be planned for the next fiscal year, but it's definitely in the FY25 fiscal year. If it's not in the FY24 fiscal year, is starting to retrofit LED lights on Rehoboth Avenue. So if we're going to seriously make recommendations, we probably want to do it before that transition starts to happen.
Yeah, I volunteered, I guess after I heard the one woman's presentation that has the nuisance situation on her property. And then I actually got a couple of people who had watched the meeting on the video of the meeting contacted me and said, that's, you know, about the previous, what you're referring to, Ed, that didn't go anywhere, and they were wondering why it hadn't gone anywhere before. So I thought, well, I should, if I'm going to be spearheading this at all, probably the first step is to talk to some of the people that worked on it before and get the whole history of it and
I'd like to welcome Mr. Kevin Williams.
Yeah, I was watching
Public
upstairs
Works
and I
Director.
heard the discussion about that dark sky compliant thing. Just wanted to let y'all know there is a contract this fiscal year, it's about to be advertised today, in fact. We're replacing the lights down the median of Rehoboth Avenue, so the teardrops.
Okay, I just mentioned that. I was like, I think it's an FY24, but if not, it's definitely an FY25.
So the long range has 3-phase program. This is phase 1, which will do the 70 lights up and down the median. Second phase is to be the sidewalk lights on Rehoboth Avenue, and then phase 3 would be the boardwalk lights. All under the, whatever, 3,000 degree Kelvin, I think the new code requirement for lighting, so, which meets dark sky compliance. Not that we're attempting as a city to be dark sky compliant, but those lights do fall under that category.
That's excellent to know. Thank you for.
You're welcome.
What do we need to do to be dark sky compliant?
Not my line, so I don't know. I know somebody did that research before.
You sounded knowledgeable. I was going to
Only
say.
because I was told we will use 3,000 degree Kelvin.
And that's a cooler light, or is
It
that?
is. I think that talks to the color of the light more than anything else.
What color is it going to be? Yellow?
3,000 degree Kelvin, whatever.
I think
color that
there's
is.
a lot of factors that go into it
There
from my
are.
recollection. And one of them is how it's shielded from the top down. So it's not just about the light bulb, it's how it's shielded, where it's projecting the light, et cetera. So I think that's what Kevin means when the light bulb is dark sky compliant, but the configuration of it may not be.
are you getting new fixtures for those?
They'll look just like the ones we have out there now. New arms and new fixtures and new lamps.
Okay.
And so, Kevin, just, this is probably more of my curiosity. We are getting new arms and fixtures. They're not being repainted or retrofitted. It's
correct.
all brand new.
All brand new, powder coated, so they'll
Excellent.
hopefully last for a couple years anyway before they start pitting and wearing
So
away.
I think if we move forward with these two items, we really need to look at it from two perspectives. One, private property, one, public property, if we're going to look at recommendations. And but I do feel like before we spend a whole lot of time and energy, we should check the pulse of the mayor and commissioners on.
I know there was a lot of discussion a couple of years ago, several years ago, about that. And the decision at that point was do everything that would, be required to achieve dark sky compliance. But the thought was we couldn't do enough to be dark sky compliance, and we didn't want to make that effort
Right.
to do that. So
And
that's
that
why they
was-
went to the specific lights that we
That
control.
was more of an administrative directive than an ordinance.
The ordinance for the light was passed, but the action
I do
to,
not remember that.
it was several years ago.
Yeah. I remember the discussions, but I don't actually remember passing anything.
Correct me if I'm wrong, all the other street lights are Delmarva.
The vast majority are.
Yeah,
There are some other isolated ones that the city owns, but
right. Because I think over time, like as one completely fails, they're putting a different type of fixture on, but they're not wholesale going through and doing that if the light fixture still works.
right.
Okay,
Great.
All right, thank you,
thank
Kevin.
you.
Any other comments on this?
I would just say it's still in a very information gathering phase for us because, at least for me, it's not an issue that I'm super knowledgeable about, and there's a lot of material that I'm going to try and read up on.
Yeah.
And from my perspective, it would be nice to know, and once the engagement HQ gets out there, is how big an issue is, that light pollution from your neighbor? Because, I don't have any issues on my block, I will say. When we go out walking, you can tell that people's lights are not spilling onto other people's properties. Yes, we have soffit lights, we turn them out when we go to bed. So by 9, 10 o'clock at night, they're turned off.
This seems like,
I mean, if it's a sporadic issue with a given neighbor, I don't like the idea of passing regulations to take care of a problem neighbor situation unless it's widespread.
this is one of those topics where a public survey would be most
Yes,
helpful.
agreed, agreed.
I
Yep.
think what, if I recall the presentation that we had, it sounded to me like it's kind of a growing trend in the new house design.
I
So
agree.
currently, a lot of people don't have their houses lit up, and it's not a problem for a lot of people, but if the trend continues, I don't think it's a good direction, so.
Well, I think part of it is, if you were to go over and look at the house in question,
Yeah,
they put significantly more soffit lights up on a given side than, for example, we did. Because we didn't want them in front of our own windows. So we don't have many. We have it so that the sides are lit up, and we have a dog that goes out at night, and, we wanted light out there. That one, the number of them, I think, is an issue. And I also think they're using much brighter bulbs. So we may be able to do something from a bulb perspective, but I don't like putting more regulations on people of what they can design into their homes.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I'm not in favor of regulation, especially on this. But again, I think it's education, and it's sharing information and being, hey, just like we do with noise,
Right.
like be a good neighbor.
Right.
Right. Consider
Exactly.
you're in a residential area.
Yep.
Be considerate.
Yep.
Yeah, and that's why I feel if we move forward with it, that we do separate it to residential. Let's first attack our streets, right? The city, the beauty of the town, and present that. But
And you have the added complication of, a lot of properties are rental properties. And so, landlords try to control their tenants, but you can't be sure that your tenant isn't going to turn every light on.
Exactly.
night,
Exactly.
I'm directly behind Rise Coffee, and I got lights in my bedroom all night long.
I have a similar situation. There's lights all night long, and they leave them on, they told me, because the police chief told them to do that in order to deter crime. So,
Well, it
yeah,
does.
I say, yeah, so it's going to be difficult, but I think there's two paths we should, the one path, try the easiest one first,
right. The only thing that maybe a little bit different thinking from me is that, having just gone through building a house, our building code is very detailed. Like, there's so many hoops that you have to jump through. And I personally don't think that it would be burdensome to have something in the building code about excessive amount of lighting. Obviously, people don't necessarily have to be dark sky compliant in the building code, but the idea that somebody could put the amount of lights on their house that this woman described and had the pictures, it just seems like, it just seems wrong to me that people are permitted to create these nuisances. So, I would, if I started moving in this direction, I do think with new construction, some thought should be given to this issue, but.
Well, I think your first point to maybe it's a great topic to survey our people,
Yeah.
and see if that's a
Right.
one-liner, then okay, or maybe there's Maybe it is a big issue, you know, we don't know. We've heard one.
Right.
The city puts limits on the height of a building, the footprint it can take up.
Yep.
You know, it may be,
Yeah,
like
there's-
Mary was
there's-
saying, there may be something that can be added.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to that, yeah. But that's a big one to bite too.
Yeah.
All right, excellent. So we'll kind of come back to this topic. In this discussion, we talked a decent amount about engaging with the public, and perhaps at our next meeting, if someone would maybe think about a list of items that this committee would recommend to the Director of Communications, of topics and different things that we may want to start with that engagement HQ, recommendations on environmental issues to get the pulse of the community on.
So would we work on our list for next time, and then maybe the following meeting have Lynn come and look at the list with us, or would we invite her to the next meeting?
I might invite her to the next meeting
Okay.
because I think
Okay.
not being that familiar with how
Right.
with how
How
it
do we have
works,
to word them? Yeah.
I don't know exactly the best way to phrase
Right,
things or
right.
how to structure it. So
Yep.
I may ask her to come to the next meeting
Yep.
so we can maybe better understand how to utilize Engagement HQ.
Yep.
Okay. So I'll put that down as a new item of, a new agenda item. Lastly, on our agenda, I probably held this over, just to remind myself that, when I spoke to the folks at the Delaware Solid Waste Authority, they certainly, gave me a lot of feedback on why we can't do certain things and, the use of, Kavana, et cetera. But they were very interested and happy to come here and do a town hall or a seminar about recycling and waste in general. So I still have that on my sort of to-do list to try to set that up. I think the summertime is just incredibly difficult to do it, but perhaps, September, October, maybe a good period of time to try to get someone here to do a town hall like that. So, so I've got that on my to-do list. Are there any other comments on that?
No, I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, and also, one of the things that occurs to me is that we could use another site for, the state has various drop-off points for batteries and such, and they're not that convenient here in Rehoboth, and maybe we could talk to them about whether we could have another, like a battery drop-off place that's more convenient here.
Yeah, I did talk to them about that, and they said it's not impossible. I can't remember if it's Long Neck or Wolf Neck is the closest to Rehoboth, but it's one of the two.
Probably Long Neck.
It's
It's
one of
probably
the
the
two.
transfer station.
Yeah, the transfer station.
Yeah, that's out on Route 5.
And there was a very specific reason why we've never been able to make the Rehoboth Beach Recycling Center able to accept those items. They said it's not impossible. With enough pressure, we might be able to get it done, but they said it would be challenging,
Okay.
and people have tried in the past, and it's been unsuccessful. But I think it's certainly something that we can continue to think about and try to, and that's, part of whatever town hall or presentation we invite them to come give. I think they can touch on that a little bit more with the specifics on, it's in a very limited number of areas, and they can rationalize why that is. I certainly can't on their behalf.
I think when they went to curbside recycling, they significantly cut down on other recycling locations. I'm guessing it was probably all about cost.
Oh, yeah. So we've covered a bunch of agenda items. Any comments from the public? I think we have one of our interns is joining us today. So thank you for being here. Any other items for future agendas?
Not that I
Got a lot on there already.
Yeah, but I am going to add public engagement with Engagement HQ and how to best utilize that. Any committee member comments in general?
Nope.
Okay, as we're looking at the next meeting dates, I will be on vacation the week of our next meeting.
I will
So
as well.
there we go. So what we can do is reschedule it for another date, or it's just skip it and resume again in September. What's the thought of the committee?
Well, if we're gonna learn about Engagement HQ so that we can start putting together some stuff, I would vote for rescheduling if we can come up with a date that works for most people, as opposed to pushing it out to September.
Yeah, I'm for that too. I mean, it's August, it's gonna be blazing hot. There are gonna be news articles about the environment all over the place. People would probably like to see what we're up to.
But I know we have to
think.
coordinate with other uses of this room,
Yeah,
other
I'm
meetings.
just,
Ooh. That's way early. Yeah,
think
that's
that's too
probably
soon.
too soon. That's not, that's only 2 weeks out. Well, he's on
but
vacation
yeah,
that week.
I'm gone
That's
that
the
week.
schedule,
if-
right? Yeah.
22nd, 23rd, 20. That's 2
Oh,
weeks
that's
out.
2 weeks. What about the 25th? Is there anything? Yeah, is there anything on the agenda for that, or the 24th? Whatever. So the 25th is a Friday. Would that work for everyone?
Good by me.
As long
What-
as or we would be looking at the afternoon.
Um,
I have an 8:30 appointment that day, so
Yeah,
as
we
long
could
as
just
it's
stick with the
later
1
morning or
o'clock.
1 o'clock, yeah.
Does that work for everyone?
Not for me, but that's okay. I mean, I don't want to be the holdup.
Would a different time that day work?
No, I'm actually got a planned event with a high school buddy that day. We're going to go crabbing.
What about the 24th?
Yeah, we could do the 24th,
24th,
which
can you
is
do it?
Thursday.
Sure. Yeah, early would be good.
Does that work for everyone, the 24th? 10 a.m.? 1, you said 1's not good?
I'd rather, yeah, because I need to kind of get ready for my crabbing event. So, but
So let's say 10 a.m. on the 24th?
okay, yeah, that's great. That'll get me home back. Yeah.
And we'll try to make
Thank
it
you.
we'll
Thank
try
you.
to make it short and sweet and more informational to give us guidance and homework for the next meeting.
So
10
August
a.m.
24th at 10, right? Thank you.
All right, any closing remarks from anyone?
It may not be short, but we're always sweet.
Okay.
Couldn't resist, couldn't.
I move we adjourn.
Yes.
Anything from the public? Okay. Adjourning the meeting at 2:14 p.m. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.